Hi guys. This is an unusual video for Rebel Massage, but all the reason to have this conversation. We are chatting with Ann Williams. I don't normally have these kind of interview videos on my channel, but today we are chatting with Ann Williams because we are in the midst of a pandemic and we have a lot of questions about reemerging and reopening. And I put out there to you guys recently on social media what questions you might have. I got a lot of questions in response. I know I have a lot of questions. How can we reopen? How do we reopen? How do we know what the protocol is? And unbelievably, in my good fortune, Ann Williams has shown up to answer these questions for us. So welcome, Ann. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me.
So I want you to talk a little bit quickly about why you're the person I think would be so appropriate to answer a lot of these questions. Can you start with that?
Absolutely. So I'll just give you a very brief history of my background. Like many of you out there, I'm a massage therapist and I've been a massage therapist for 23 years. I quickly moved into the education sector and started to teach massage in Washington State with Seattle Massage School. And then eventually I ran the campus at Fife as the director of education for a number of years. Did a lot of work with curriculum development. And then I worked for ABMP as their director of education for 14 years, a wonderful organization.
Mhm.
And just recently, I left ABMP to develop this digital textbook program with my husband, Eric Brown, who's long been a leader in online education for the massage therapy profession. So
Awesome.
before I go too far, I should say I am not a doctor. And what I do is read everything coming out of the World Health Organization and the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control. I read some of the emerging research, and most of it isn't peer reviewed right now. People are publishing early just to get it out there and to share it with scientists around the world. So I'm doing all of that, and I'm applying what's being said for a more traditional healthcare setting, like a hospital or a physician's office. And I'm taking that information and saying, how does this apply in a massage setting? How does this apply to the practice of massage therapy? So I just want to make sure that people understand that there are lots of people who are much more expert than me, and I'll be very quick to tell you if I have no clue about something. And just to say, this is what
Great.
I've read, this is what the discussion's been. And obviously, as you and I were just discussing, COVID-19 is a rapidly emerging situation. Information is changing all of the time. Something that we believe to be true a week ago has shifted, and we have to all update. So we have to remain very fluid as therapists and stay very alert to how our world is changing. And this situation asks each of us to really make some pretty big shifts in the way we operate in the world. But here's the great thing about humans. We are resistant to change, we're resistant to change, we're resistant to change. And then when it becomes crystal clear that we must change, we do, and we do it rapidly and we do it effectively.
That's fantastic.
Yeah,
That's
so
so
I
true.
believe. Yeah, it
Yeah,
is
that's so
true.
true. Oh my gosh, it's so true. So all of this, first of all, thank you for all of the research that you do, and of course, if we can apply what we know and what you're learning from this traditional hospital or doctor setting to how we are practicing in our own clinics, I think that's the very basic and most amazing first step that we can do, because like you said, there's just all this information that is constantly shifting and moving. So how do we adapt? But I think that for me, that gives me our first question, which is kind of how do we know? I think a lot of people are kind of like, how do we know when to reemerge? And then a lot of the comments that I'm seeing online are, we already do all of this stuff. We already, as massage therapists, we already are like crazy good with our hygiene. We already wash our hands all the time. We already wash down doorknobs. We wash our sheets. We wash our tables. So what is it that's changing from what we used to do to what we have to do now?
So there's actually quite a lot that changes in terms of how we're screening clients up front and the level of screening that we're doing. And then our whole arrival procedures need to shift in terms of how we welcome clients into our facility. And then some of the healthcare questions that we're asking have to change, and our responses to those healthcare questions have to change. And then our level of sanitation and hygiene actually has to be, I call it in the textbook, supercharged. And it goes far beyond what we're currently doing. Not far beyond, I should paddle that back a little. It definitely is more restrictive than what we're doing now, and we have to be more careful. For example, one thing that when I say this, people's mouths start to gape open and their eyes get large, and they order a drink from the local bartender, right? We need to change our clothes between every session,
Between every
because
session. That's a big question.
respiratory droplets, if they're contaminated, they're getting on our clothing.
So many questions already. So
Yeah.
respiratory droplets I want to talk about, but I want to hold that one for a second.
Okay.
Going back to so intake protocols and waiting rooms and stuff like that. So starting with health history, starting with where do we, so somebody had asked very specifically, do we even let people stay in the waiting room anymore? What do you think about that kind of stuff? Introductory stuff.
It's such a big question. And I think one of the things we have to do is frame it. Everyone's community is different. The levels of COVID-19 in everyone's community is at a different place right now. Some states, their caseload is going up and they're opening up anyway. Some states, their caseload is going down. So I think for each of us, it's an individual question about how far we go. But what I would do is err on the side of extreme safety. And I say that because if in 6 months we all say to ourselves, I did a little bit too much, I didn't need to do all that, I worked a little too hard, but I'm alive, my mom's alive, my grandma's alive, and none of us have any lasting lung damage or mental health issues as a result of catching COVID-19, and I don't have a huge hospital bill. Then I would say that the extra 15 minutes we spent or 20 minutes we spent on every client was well worth it. We need to be screening with a phone call 24 hours ahead. Hello, client. This is therapist. I just need to check with you. Have you developed any respiratory, cold, or flu-like symptoms since we booked this appointment? Have you been in contact with anybody who has respiratory or flu-like symptoms or any illness in the last 24 hours or in the last, at any time in the last 2 weeks? Has a health professional of any type asked you to self-quarantine in the last 2 weeks? Have you had a COVID-19 test in the last 2 weeks? What was the result? What sort of test did you have? Like, we're screening for COVID-19 basically, and for exposure to COVID-19. And if we have any reason to believe that there has been exposure, we need to reschedule that massage and not have that client show up at our doorstep.
Somebody had asked, do you recommend having the ability to take their temperature and a pulse oximeter on site?
The procedure that I would use is that we're letting a client know up front that we want them to remain in their car until we text them or call them to come in. And then when they arrive at the door, we're greeting them at the door, and we're not hugging them, kissing them, or shaking their hand, even though we want to.
We are touch people.
I know, we're doing really big long distance hugs. We're maintaining as much distance as we can for as much of the time as we can, and we can talk about that in a minute. But I definitely think having a no-touch thermal temperature taker and scanning the client's temperature is not a bad idea. I think it's important to repeat those questions. Have you developed any symptoms since we spoke on the phone yesterday? Okay, you haven't. Now, let me check. Do you have an appropriate face mask? If you don't, here's a disposable surgical mask that you can wear on my facility. Let's decontaminate our hands by using an alcohol-based hand sanitizer. before you put on that mask, and then before you enter the facility. And now I am not going to let you sit around in my waiting room with other people. I'm going to walk you right back to the session room. And if there's anything that we need to do, like updating your health forms, if we haven't taken care of that over the phone or the internet, or figuring out what you want and need from the session today, if we haven't done that over the phone or via the internet, making sure that you've signed off on informed consent, on high-risk conditions, and on COVID-19 tracking should our clinic have an outbreak, making sure you've signed off on that paperwork, and now we can go ahead and begin the massage. And yes, you do need to keep that face mask on throughout the massage. If your client is prone, we might have to make some accommodations there, and we'll have to figure that out based on our own sense of anxiety or what we're doing to keep ourselves safe.
Right. So we've got the health history form. We've had the really clear communication, which I think you've given us some good words to use. I think a lot of massage therapists get a little bit nervous about how exactly do I say these things in the moment. I think you've given really good questions for us to use. And we've clarified about face masks, washing hands, and the product to use, washing hands, which I think I want to touch back on again in a little bit. But now we've got our client in the room. So now we're looking at, one of the big questions that I get is, if the client is prone, do they still need to be wearing a mask? And if they do, is it okay for them to just use a pillowcase? Does that work? Is it still, do I need to be wearing gloves? Do I need to be thinking about, now what does the room look like? What do the materials in the room look like? Can we dive into that a little bit more?
Absolutely. So let's say, okay, we've got our client in the session room and we're ready to begin the massage, and we've all followed proper hand hygiene. We have washed our hands. We've used an alcohol-based hand sanitizer, and we're ready to touch the client. We need to be I believe we need to be wearing an N95 face mask. And I can talk a little bit about face masks in a minute. The client can be in a disposable surgical mask. I would put them in a surgical mask before I would let them use their own very loose face covering to keep for my own safety. I'm the one who's going to be exposed the most throughout this process. Now, if a client is face down in a face rest, their respiratory droplets, which are most likely to be the way that COVID-19 is spreading, those are pretty heavy. They're going to fall to the floor. They're going to fall onto the tops of your shoes. They're going to fall onto your pant legs if you're standing kind of under the face rest, doing some of those motions down the back. But they're not up in your airspace so much. Now, I personally, and I actually I kind of helped the FSMTB a little bit with their guidelines document, and they had a task force that sort of did the bulk of the work. And then I went through and kind of restructured their document, did some fact checking for them, and sort of kind of clarified some of the language to keep the language consistent. Now, I definitely agree with you. Like, I think a great solution is to tuck a pillowcase in and have it kind of sit down underneath the face cradle. That's catching a person's respiratory droplets. And when you're ready to turn them over, you're just kind of pulling it, closing the respiratory droplets inside, and sort of putting it into a trash bag so that it's out of the way. You'll wash it later. You're not.
Right. But just so you're clear, it's not that the pillowcase is covering the face cradle and their face is stuck against it. It's that it's down below and catching droplets.
Yes. But everyone on the task force really disagreed with this. They really didn't like this idea at all. And I didn't have the chance to have a conversation with them to really figure out why. But that's what I would do. And I would stand by that, because if your person wants to stay in their face mask, great. But I wouldn't. I would feel completely claustrophobic if I had a face mask. And I don't want my clients to feel claustrophobic.
Right.
We're
That's
already...
the other conversation. Exactly. That's the other conversation that comes up, is that, the whole purpose of a massage is to relieve the stress and the tension. And if you're getting that panic attack from your session, you're defeating the purpose. So then,
yeah.
Have you?
Absolutely.
Hmm.
Absolutely. So that's what I would do. But I also want to just put it out there that there have been other massage opinions that uh, disagree with me. So
Hmm.
I think everybody has to, in the end, make their own decision. And we are all sort of, we're making the best call that we can based on what we know. But information about COVID-19 is still emerging.
But this raises another point. So you were just talking about how if somebody is prone and there's nothing there to block the respiratory droplets from going down and it possibly falls on your shoes. Somebody had said, do I need to change my shoes? Do I need to wear shoe coverings? How long, to your knowledge, what do you know about? I know that there's a lot of information out there about how long the virus can last on different surfaces. And so, metal, I believe I read that it doesn't last very long on metal, but when it comes to other more porous surfaces, it can hang on a little bit longer. So what do you know about that?
So it does last different amounts of time on different surfaces, but here's something to know. At Johns Williams University, they did a very comprehensive study on cleaning products. And, in the textbook that I've written, I write use a hypochlorite based product. That's a bleach based product. And the reason that I say that is because we know that that kills COVID dead, and it does it in a very short time frame, even if you're not leaving the product wet on a surface. So I think just use like a bleach based wipe, like a Clorox bleach
Hmm.
based wipe. I
Hmm.
actually have a cleaning supply list people can download with recommended product. For me, I'd wipe off my shoes with a hypochlorite based wipe, with a bleach based wipe, and I
Hmm.
would call that good. And as I said, the thing I wouldn't do, I would change my clothes. Like I would get multiple sets of scrubs. You can get them for
Hmm.
17 bucks.
Hmm.
And I would literally change my scrubs in between every client. And I would do that before I dressed the massage table with fresh linens.
Hmm.
So, there's kind of like this protocol we can follow, which I've written out for people. So it kind of makes it a little bit easier because it's like learning new habits. What do I
Hmm.
do first? What do I do second? What do I do third? Um,
So you would, let me just to get a sense of what this looks like. We've worked on a client, we've said goodbye to them. So we've led them off the table and said goodbye to them, and then we wash our hands, and then we strip the table, and then we wipe down the table, and then we change our clothes, and then we reset the table.
yeah.
Okay. So just to
And
give
there's only
everybody steps on that.
one thing that you're missing in there. We open every window and door and we run
Mm.
fans to circulate the air. We're circulating fresh air as often as possible and as
Hmm.
much as possible. And if
I'm like
we
taking notes. I'm taking notes. I hope you guys are taking notes.
and if we can't, I actually, before we go, I'll make sure I make you aware of all the resources I've created. I have
Yes.
one more training that I'm doing that's a video training, and it literally is the step-by-step chronological procedure of everything that we do during a day of massage, because
Amazing.
this is new habit learning and it's
Right.
all about doing it in an efficient and effective order. And I've created a whole bunch of documents for policy language changes just to help
Amazing.
people make this fast and easy because it's a
Right.
lot.
It is a
So we'll
lot.
make sure that we get people to those resources because they're all free if they want them. So if we're in a multi-room session, I believe that what we're going to need to do is stagger our sessions so we don't have too many people sort of walking into the facility at the same time. We want as
Hmm.
much social distance or physical distance as we can get.
Hmm.
And then at the end of our session, once our client has left, we're opening the doors, we're running a fan to circulate the air, we're opening the windows. If we don't have windows, I would suggest that you purchase a portable HEPA air filter. There are lots of different air filters out there, but the reason I say the HEPA air filter is that there's been no research right now on COVID-19, but in isolation wards in China with SARS, which is a related virus,
Virus. Hmm.
they used HEPA filters in all the isolation wards to help reduce the spread of SARS. So
Hmm.
I believe that this will be a good choice. I can't say that it's been proven effective.
Mhm.
But the
Mhm.
other thing I did was I went to the American, I have to look at their name. It's the longest name ever. The American Society of Heating and Air Conditioning Engineers.
It's like
And they have,
NCBTMB.
yes, they have a lengthy sort of document on recommendations related to COVID. And there's been a lot of talk about this right now with air conditioning in the media.
Yes.
Their recommendation is run air conditioning systems, run your heating, air conditioning as normal, and just add other ventilation and other filtration.
This whole thing, if we look at what the virus does, what COVID does, it is transmitted through the respiratory droplets, and those can be heavy and drop to the ground, or they can be more aerosol like, depending on the trajectory or the projection and the proximity, right? And so if we're looking at an enclosed space, we're constantly looking at how to keep that air moving so that it doesn't go into to settle into something that we need to that whatever it would be, or so that it doesn't kind of get breathed in by ourselves.
Yeah, and our face mask will protect us, right? Like
Right.
if we have, especially if we can get our hands on, and this might be a great time to talk about, let me backtrack.
There's so much
Let's
to talk about.
talk about how COVID-19, what we believe,
Yes.
what we understand, or what scientists believe about how it is transmitted. And of course, these ideas are constantly evolving. So again, I'm just doing my little disclaimer. But what we know is, first of all, there's droplet contact.
Mhm.
And with droplet contact, when we're standing about 3 feet apart, we're literally, even with talking or laughing, we're misting the people close to us with a very fine mist of respiratory droplets. And what we do is we touch our face and we drag those droplets into our mouth, our nose, or our eyes, giving a virus entry to our body. Or those droplets land on our open mouth because we're talking and laughing too.
Mhm.
The other thing, like you said, if you're coughing or sneezing and you're not covering your cough or sneeze, respiratory droplets can travel up to 25 feet in
Mhm.
one research study, depending on the amount of force behind them. We also know, like from different case studies they've done, like the choir in
Mhm.
Washington State, and they ended up. This was before we shut down. There was one person with COVID-19. They were all singing. They were taking precautions. They all sanitized their hands. They didn't touch. They didn't hug, but they were all singing in the same room for about 2 hours. And 45 people out of 65 got sick with the virus.
Right. So the
So
projection of that.
yeah, all that
Mhm.
singing, all that projection. So this
Mhm.
is not a great time to be gossiping and laughing with your clients in the session room. Like we want to, keep that down. But
Yeah.
now let's talk about
Perfect.
the N95 mask with the filtering face piece. These are respirator masks. These are the masks that are difficult to get because every healthcare provider on the front lines needs a lot of them.
Right.
But what these masks do is they prevent large and small droplets from getting into your lungs. So somebody else's large and small droplets, they contain yours, but they also keep out everybody else's. So
Mhm.
long as they fit you properly and you're wearing them properly, which is another whole discussion.
Mhm.
I would buy, if I can get hold of them, and you can. I actually went online and you can get hold of them right now. So I think that supplies are coming up for healthcare providers, other
Mhm.
healthcare providers too. Purchase 2 of them. What you're going to do is you're going to wear one for a shift, and you will absolutely want to take it off because they're a little hard to breathe in. Like you definitely feel contained.
Mhm.
So at the end of your shift or after you've done the massage, you might take this off and set it aside and wear a different type of face covering around something a little bit not so form fitting around your practice while you clean up. But then you're going to put it back on, decontaminate your hands carefully after doing that because the outside surface and the inside surface are now contaminated. Wear it for your next massage throughout that whole day. Then you're going to take it off. You're going to put it in a brown paper, any kind of paper sack, with lots of airspace around it, seal up the sac, put it on a shelf, and let it sit there for 24 hours. The next day, you're going to wear your other mask, and you're going to rotate them back and forth. And the CDC says that this is okay. Every 24 hours, you're wearing a different mask, because on mask material like that used to create the N95 mask, COVID-19 lasts 17 hours.
And you think that the supplies are coming back up
I
of
do,
the
because
COVID,
they're
of the
available
masks?
online right now.
That's
I
great.
saw like Massage Warehouse, they don't have an N95 respirator filtering face piece respirator, but they have an N95 cone-shaped disposable mask right now. And the N stands for not resistant to oil, and the 95 stands for filters 95% of large and small droplets, respiratory
That's so
droplets.
good to know. That's so
Yeah,
good to know. I didn't know
yeah,
that.
yeah. I didn't
So
either until I looked it up.
that's so great. So the people who are making toilet paper and N95 masks are
Go
doing
get
it.
them,
They're coming back.
Tigers, because I'm
Coming,
down to one roll of toilet paper. I'm going to have to go shopping soon.
they're coming back though. It's coming back.
Yeah,
So
they're
that's a good
coming
thing.
back.
Because I did get some questions about us being a little hesitant about, not wanting to take away from the healthcare providers who are on the front lines. So I think that's a good bit of information to know that they are available a little bit more readily, which is great.
It's such a hard thing, because I agree. I wouldn't want to take them away from healthcare providers either.
Mm-hmm.
But I also feel like we have an obligation to our families
Mm-hmm.
to take care of our own health, and to our clients. So we are healthcare providers too, and we have a right to be safe and to be healthy.
But the other question I had, and I think a lot of people have, is if we can't get the N95 mask, what do you think about the other masks that are out there? What do you think about bandanas? What do you think about homemade masks? Do they work?
I would say no to the bandana in close contact. Like, remember, all of those face coverings, that's assuming that you're maintaining 6 feet of physical distance between you and other people.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I say an N95 mask is important, because we are in each other's airspace in massage therapy. I'm in my client's airspace, they're in my airspace. So I would at least want, I like the cone surgical masks
Mm-hmm.
that are disposable. They fit a little more tightly around the face, and I think
Mm-hmm.
that they would do a better job of keeping in respiratory droplets.
Mm-hmm.
But
Okay.
I would not let somebody show up with a scarf wrapped around their face with cotton, or a homemade cotton mask. I would want it to be a true
True mask.
medical face mask.
Okay. And would you maybe even have some in your office to offer in case somebody does walk in with something?
Absolutely. I would
Okay.
want every single one of my clients, if they don't show up with a reasonable face covering that I feel will protect me from whatever they
Mm-hmm.
might be bringing in, I would want to provide them with a disposable face mask. I think it's worth
Right.
the money to do that.
When you were saying washing your hands with hand sanitizer very specifically, so soapy water out of the question?
No, the hand hygiene protocol is you're washing your hands. There's a CDC protocol for healthcare providers,
Mm-hmm.
and that's also in our resources section, like a little poster that they can download and post right next to a sink so that you remember it. It can be any liquid soap and water, but it's 20 seconds, and you're really frictioning, and you're washing all the surfaces, and we need to get our elbow and forearm. If we're going to use this on the client, this needs to be washed too. And then if we don't have soap and water available, we're using an alcohol-based hand sanitizer,
Mm-hmm.
and it has to be at least 60% alcohol. And the hospital grade is always 70% alcohol. And that's better for massage therapy anyway, because if your hands are greasy, like they are with lubricants,
Mm-hmm.
they're not quite as effective. So they're much more effective if they're higher alcohol. So the higher alcohol, the better.
So this brings me to my next question, because I have been joking about the fact that hand sanitizer is now my new perfume. It's just it's the scent of the world these days. And I don't love the smell of them. So we, as massage therapists, one of our things that we love to do is create the whole feeling of a room. And that can often be using aromatherapy. So with misters and all of the other elements that we have in the room. So what about misters? What about hot pads? What about hot rocks, hot towels, any of that kind of stuff? Can you talk about that?
I have not read anything that would lead me to believe that you can't use those things any longer. Um, that would be my bottom line on that. Like, I I can't imagine why those things wouldn't still be appropriate. So I don't think that that will be a problem. Just as long as you're sanitizing them properly and knowing that anything that's kind of left out on your tables is getting a fine mist of respiratory droplets. So one of
So
the things to do is declutter all of like your beautiful moon altar. I would pack it away. Like I would just get all of my I don't know if you have a moon altar.
I don't,
I
but
guess
that's
I'm
yeah.
projecting. It's a
No,
great thing to have.
it's a great
Um,
example.
yeah. But if you've got, all of your spiritual things, your shells, your bells, all those beautiful things that you love to have, they're dust collectors and they're respiratory drop collectors. So for now, while COVID is circulating in our communities, I say pack those things away so that you can wipe down countertops, shelving, everything in between clients.
With ease, yeah. And aromatherapy to be used as a cleansing agent.
Not now, because we have no evidence of its efficacy at this time. So I wouldn't use it. I love aromatherapy. I'm huge into aromatherapy, and definitely, it's been used for medicine for lots of time, and it's an amazing thing. The problem I would say is in the United States, we get a lot of synthetic essential oils that are not pure and natural, and pure and natural is not a regulated term. So everyone can say that their essential oils are pure and natural, and nobody's actually verifying that they are. And there are some companies actually who say that they're certified pure and natural, but they're certified pure and natural by their company. So it's all a big scam and scheme. So no, I would say no, don't use essential oils right now unless you're willing to do the hard work and pay the hard money to have them independently tested by a chemist. And until you're willing to do that, you cannot verify that they are pure and natural.
And even then, relying on them as a cleansing agent is just not, we're not there yet. We don't know enough yet. Is there any specific laundry detergent that you recommend or?
No, and that's a great thing about COVID-19 is the research shows that it responds to all cleaning products. So you can do your laundry the way you always have. But since we're on the subject of laundry, let me just say that when you're folding up your laundry, fold it into the middle so that it creates kind of a bundle where the contaminated surface would be on the inside, and don't shake your laundry. The CDC says that disperses respiratory droplets into the air that you can then inhale. Also, don't leave your laundry right now in a ventilated container, which is typical of massage practice or appropriate
like
for
a
normal
basket.
laundry. It needs to go into a sealed garbage bag or into a sealed closed container. And don't leave it sitting around. Wash it promptly. And when you handle it, wear a face mask to handle it in case you're dispersing respiratory droplets into the air. You don't want to breathe those in. The other thing is, if you're going to transport it in your car, make sure that it is in a sealed garbage sack so that it's not dispersing respiratory droplets into the closed space of your car.
In your trunk, maybe even too.
Yeah, in your trunk. Well, and then open it up and give yourself a nice big dose.
Yes. Yeah. Oh,
Ah!
yeah, true. Oh my gosh, it's all the things that we have to think about. There's just so many things that we have to think about. One of the questions I got that I just remembered is if somebody is asymptomatic and possibly doesn't know and then finds out later, is there anything that massage therapy can do that is contraindicated?
Not that I know of. I don't think there's any evidence either way at this point. But if somebody's asymptomatic, they're feeling in good health, I doubt it. That would be
Right.
my instinct would be no, it's fine. The worrying thing is though is you will need to follow up with clients, and I actually have some forms for this ready for you, if people want to use them. You're going to need to call your client a week after the session and say, hey, have you developed any weird symptoms since I saw you? No, that's 1 week. Good. 2 weeks. Hi, it's me again. You should
Mm-hmm.
come back for another appointment unless you've developed any weird symptoms since I last talked to you.
Mm-hmm.
Now, should a client test positive for COVID-19 or have some weird symptoms, you're on the phone to your state health department and you're saying, this is what happened, this is the situation, and they may decide to do COVID-19 tracing at that point. So there's a release form that I created that lets the client know that in the event somebody at your clinic tests positive for COVID-19 or the health department should feel that they want to follow up, their name and contact details will be released to the health department for the health department's follow-up.
That's good to know. That's really
Yeah.
good to know. And all those forms, I will have links to all those forms, and any links that you guys need, I'll include in the description below. So don't worry about
They
trying to
all
search it
come
for it.
as part of the textbook package. So when you
Mm-hmm.
get the digital textbook, in chapter 8, which is the coronavirus chapter, there's now a brand new section that we just updated 2 days ago that's safety training videos and all of these different forms to make it easy.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect. So I want to talk about your book in a second, because I definitely want to
Okay.
wrap it up with your book, which is incredible. But for us, I think as massage therapists, we're always teetering on this, like, how can we elevate our professional level within the healthcare community? And I think the more protocol we follow and the more we are in alignment with state guidelines and government guidelines and healthcare guidelines, the more this is going to benefit us in the long run. So all these kind of funny silver linings are showing up through this pandemic. And I think one of the great ones for massage therapists is the lack of touch and how that's showing us how much people need touch. B, how
Yeah.
we can handle this and show up as professionals. And then C, maybe hoping to become a little more insurable. Like maybe we can document ourselves clearly and start to become an insured practice, which would be great, but that's
Yeah.
another conversation. So one of the questions that I've gotten, and this is really funny because quite literally last night I got a letter from CAMTC, which is the California
Yeah.
Massage Governing Board, and very clearly the letter was like, just to be clear, there is no massage therapy happening in California. And a lot of counties and a lot of cities are deciding to do kind of whatever they want, but the state itself is still saying this is a state mandated thing. You are not allowed to be practicing. So California is still on lockdown in that way, but then Illinois was opening up and going, you guys can practice, but only for a half an hour per session. So can you talk about why that would be?
This is what I suspect. I don't know for sure. And
Mm-hmm.
it's funny because in the textbook, I tell everybody, don't do 30-minute sessions. Like, you're doing all this extra cleaning. Just get that off your menu. If they don't want to show up for an hour, forget about it. So I might have to change that in 5 minutes. But what I suspect is that they want to keep the viral load exposure time down. So let's say I'm your massage therapist, you're my client, and you come in and you are asymptomatic or you haven't developed symptoms yet. And I spend 30 minutes with you. That's far less of your respiratory droplets in my space
Mm-hmm.
than an hour-long session. So my guess is they're trying to reduce the amount of potential contact time that people are exposed.
You called it a viral load
Viral
again?
load, like
A viral load.
how much virus is present. Nobody really is quite certain yet about viral load and COVID-19. Like, we can't say if you're in close contact in a space this size for
Right.
30 minutes, your likelihood of getting the infection goes way up. We can't say that. Nobody knows right now. But that would be my guess, is they're trying to limit the amount of time that people are exposed to one another, that they're within close contact.
Keeping the chances down. So maybe in a half an hour, somebody doesn't laugh at this amazing joke that you told, but in the hour, maybe you break down and tell a joke and then they laugh really loud and then those respiratory, who knows? I don't
And then
know.
you inhale and it's all
Right,
over.
right.
But I
But the
think
chances, keeping the
I
chances
would
down.
also point everyone to the FSMTB document, the
Mhm,
Federation of State Massage Therapy Boards.
mhm,
They really did an excellent job, as they always do. They're very thoughtful as an organization. They're
mhm,
incredibly professional, and they're making the recommendation to your state boards about what needs to happen.
mhm,
Um, so I would say that that is a great place to go. And I would also say that if it's illegal to practice in your state, nobody's liability insurance is covering you in that
right.
case.
Mhm,
So just be aware of that.
mhm,
You're not covered then. And
mhm.
liability and COVID is a whole issue that nobody's even looked at yet.
Right. So that's treading on very thin ice that might be very scary. So
Yeah.
stay safe.
And
Yeah.
even if your state did open up, I would call my professional organization and
Mhm,
ask them, what are your guidelines around who's covered and
mhm,
what this looks like? I
mhm,
haven't, I think that your liability insurance will just work for you in the way that it
mhm.
does, and it's not going to be this big question. I haven't heard of anybody saying you gave me COVID-19, because that would be pretty hard to prove at this point. But
Right. It would be very hard to prove. But regardless, you want to think about the fact that if you are safe, you're eventually not paying, if you do get sick, the huge hospital bills and anything else that comes along with it. So it's prevention of more drastic measures down the road by staying safer in the forefront. So I think that's the big
yeah,
message.
and I think so many people have gotten a little bit like, well, I'm going to catch it eventually. I'll just catch it. And I'm like, wait. What does your health insurance look like? And have
Right,
you looked at what your hospital bill could be? Because I
right,
think it's funny, we'll go, oh, I'll be all right. And then we go, oh, hospital bill, can't handle
right,
that.
right. The motivators that actually are so real. It's kind of like if I get sick, I get sick. With the flu has been around forever, but it does come down to the fact that we don't know enough about this, and if we do get sick and we don't have the right coverage, woof, yeah, that's not something I want to play with.
No, me
Um,
either.
okay, so can you talk to me about your book? Because your book
Okay.
that you're now offering free access to, which is incredible and so perfectly timed, is really innovative and really beautifully written. So I would love for you to talk about that for a second.
Thank you. I'm excited to
Mhm.
talk about it. So, when this all hit, I was already working on a project around digital textbooks with my husband, Eric Brown. And our whole vision is that in a digital medium, a textbook can come alive. You don't have printing costs, so it can be full of imagery. You can use multimedia functionality. You can have a video. You can do audio. You can literally read the textbook to people. And we're not there yet. Like, we're still building out what our product is going to look like. But one of the passions I have is instructional design. And I really am moving towards this model where you can watch it, you can hear it, you can read it, you apply it and play with it with learning games, and then you own it. You prove that you know the material, either with sort of critical thinking activities or through a quiz that you can do online. So when COVID hit, I already had preventing disease transmission in a massage practice written, except for the COVID part. So we sort of, we just sort of really accelerated our production time frame. We weren't going to release any textbooks until February of 2021. So Eric went to work getting the website ready and we have a custom learning platform, and we have all this custom backend so that teachers can track their students. We've got a really cool thing that we're developing, and it's not completely done, but it's quite a ways along. So I added the COVID-19 stuff, which I literally update every single week because it's changing so
We
fast.
have to, yeah.
And I've been able to add resources. Like, there's a whole training section, safety training, and 4 videos that we just added yesterday. And with all of these documents that I'm talking about, all of these things that you need to send to your clients, and what's your welcome back letter look like, and what does your informed consent look like now, I've just been able to create these things and make them available, because that's the beauty of a digital textbook. If I wrote a normal textbook, 5 years from now, I can update it, because we just printed 15,000 copies, and
Mm,
we have to sell them before we
that's it.
create anymore.
Hmm.
So this has been really amazing and really exciting. It's a very rich medium to work in, and we'll be able to continue to make it better and to get people what they need over the course of the next, month, as we continue to work on this particular product.
I am beyond excited about this. I mean,
Thank you.
I'm jumping out of my skin as you talk about it, because it's quite, I listen to books on tape all the time, and I was listening to a book on tape recently that was tapping into this, and it was a document, it was a document, or whatever the word is. It was a real book about somebody trying to kind of like uncover this crime, and in the textbook version, there's all these quotes about interviews or phone calls that have been recorded, and in the Audible textbook, you actually hear the recordings and you
Yeah.
get that rich, and like what we can do digitally now unfolds so many areas of how people absorb information, how we can be excited about the information, and how we can hold on to it, and it becomes a little deeper entrenched into who we are. And I think the fact that you're tapping into this
Yeah.
as a massage educator is like it's like the cream of the crop for me. I feel so completely over the top excited about what you're doing, and really think this is going to be something that I want you guys, like those of you who are watching this video, I want you guys to click on the links below and check out what she's doing, because it's beautiful. There's lots of like things you can kind of click on, and it flips over and you can see the answer, and there's a like interactive,
It pulls
it
you in, like it
pulls you
engages you,
in.
and it pulls you through the material. And
Right.
it's so funny, because I don't think there could be any drier material,
Oh,
but we
right.
can bring it alive in a better
We
way. And
can.
this is perfect time. So
We
we
can.
got really excited, because it was a way, for me, it was a way of taking control of my life in lockdown. And suddenly I had this purpose. If we can launch this product, make it available to the massage profession, do our little part to be helpful instead of hateful, which some people are being,
Yeah.
um, how incredible would that be? And how much better would I feel about this period in my life?
Right.
And it really has given me a sense of purpose that helps me cope with what's happening in our world.
Well, your
So,
purpose is becoming our purpose, and I feel
yay.
so grateful for that. I mean, that's when, the overflow starts to happen, and I think people are going to feel this, and they're going to see how driven you are and how passionate you are about this, and that's the best part. That's always the thing that's, anybody's passionate about anything, you're going to get sucked into it. So I love that you're doing this, and I'm really grateful. I'm really grateful.
Yeah, and it's for free, so you can experience it and, see what it's like. And if you don't like it, well, okay,
Yeah.
it's no
Yeah.
big
No harm, no
deal.
foul. Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing. Okay. All right. And so I think that there are but 9 bazillion more questions, but I think there's only so much we can talk about in one sitting.
Yeah.
But I will, just to make sure you guys all know, I will include all the links that we talked about in the description below. The main one being the link to this book that is, say the name again, Preventing.
It's called Preventing Disease Transmission in a Massage Practice. And actually, all the documents that we've talked about, they all live in Chapter 8. So they'll be able to download them from Chapter 8. But
Perfect.
if you want to,
We'll include a couple of them,
yeah, you
the
can
big
do
ones that
that.
we talked
We
about.
can figure
Okay.
that out.
We can
Yeah.
figure that out. Okay. All right. So that's amazing. So thank you so much for being here today. And thank you to Eric, even though he's in the background and not seen in this moment. But we thank both of you for taking quarantine to produce such an amazing thing for us. This is going to build us into being exactly who we want to be, especially as we reemerge. So hopefully this helped everybody who's watching. And if you have any questions or comments or anything, please leave them in the description, in the comments below, and we'll try to get to everything as much as we can. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anne. All right. Take care.